Hi, I hope you're all doing well. My name is Liz Dubelman, and I'm the editor-in-chief at WITI. I'm very excited to share our findings with you today. But before we dive in, I'd like to introduce you to my co-presenters, Dr. Carolyn Turbefeld and Ashley Feltner. Dr. Turbefeld is our managing consultant for the Glass Ceiling Report and has a doctorate in computer science. She's our resident expert in all things data related. And Ashley Feltner is the lead writer on the Glass Ceiling Report 2.0. She has a knack for organizing insights and data sets to tell the stories behind the statistics. So that's our team overview for today. We're going to walk through a lot of data and research, but the bottom line is a diverse workforce really has a positive impact on the bottom line for businesses. Now, the Glass Ceiling 2.0 has been a journey, one full of statistics and stories that pave our path forward. The glass ceiling is a very well-known and researched term that was originally coined by an American writer and diversity advocate just a short 44 years ago. The intent was to provide a visual metaphor for those barriers that women and people of color face while striving to move upward in the workplace. Then, from 1991 to 1996, the U.S. Department of Labor studied the phenomenon and how it affected women and minorities in the workforce. I think we could all agree that a lot has happened over the last 25 years, so it was time to build on those findings from the Glass Ceiling Commission. And we're excited to share those findings with you. In the 2.0 overview that we are walking through today, we will take into account in-depth research and reporting, analysis of what has been done, and recommendations to continue the diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI momentum. This work was done by Women in Technology in partnership with Intel to inform organizations and professionals across the technology industry to provide an overview of findings from 844 quantitative surveys and new research, and to change the approach around DEI solutions and messaging, and to continue our analysis and recommendations, which will all be included in the final report. Now I'd like to turn it over to Ashley.
Thanks, Liz. I'm excited to be here. As we look over our agenda for today, we're going to go over introductions and definitions, cover the economic and business benefits of your DEI efforts, look at the report findings, and then go through recommendations and a conclusion. But before we dive in, we thought it might be beneficial to give a high-level overview of the 95 report. In 1995, the Department of Labor formed the Federal Glass Ceiling Commission. And that report really opened up with some powerful words, even some harsh language, using words like betray, unbreachable. And the findings from this team really exposed the economic consequences of workplace inequities. They prescribed important steps that companies can take to make improvements. And they led to some important changes in US policy and practice. The report really documented the inherent gender bias against women and women of color. Now, we can skip forward a good 25 years, and the Glass Ceiling Report 2.0 follows up the findings of the Federal Commission from 95. We've got updated statistics and case studies. We have new research that really reveals the positive impact that a diverse leadership team can have on your organization and your industry. We've found that while much progress has been made, there are still sizable opportunities to address. And I want to challenge you all today, while we go through this information, to keep in mind that for every fact and every figure you see here, there's a woman behind the story. We all have a story to tell. And unfortunately, not all of them are positive. And that's what went into all of this. That's what shaped our mission to change the narrative around DEI, to redefine the communication approach to increase diversity and inclusion, and to highlight the positive impact of this initiative. Now, before we go into benefits, we thought it'd be great to go over some definitions. Not because any of these terms are new, they're not. But what is interesting is the actual definition of the word is often less divisive than the word itself. Take, for example, diversity. It's defined as the variety of people and ideas within an organization, which is something I think we can all agree we benefit from, diversity of thought. Then if we look at the word inclusion, it's defined as creating an environment where all individuals feel valued and feel connected. Sounds reasonable. I think we can all agree that sharing resources and opportunity is something that will eventually benefit us all. And I will turn it back over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Ashley. When we started to look at the benefits of a diverse and inclusive workforce, we automatically went to, it's the right thing to do, which of course it is. But to really see the benefits, we need to look at the numbers. What is the impact to the bottom line for the economy and for businesses? At a macro level, the numbers are big. By closing the gap in wages, credit, lending, and education, there could be an additional $5 trillion in GDP over the next 5 years. Making your employees feel included saves employers millions and boosts profits for US companies, and a diverse organization will be more successful at attracting and retaining a high caliber professional. Then if we look at the micro level, the positive impact DEI has continues. Companies with a diverse and inclusive culture have lower turnover rates, higher productivity, higher profitability, and higher customer satisfaction. Employees in a diverse and inclusive company report better performances, have increased innovation, and 83% more engaged, all of which leads to less turnover. The Bureau of Labor estimates that tech companies have the 4th highest turnover rate behind retail and hospitality. So reducing turnover can lead to big savings. So if we take a quick look over at the turnover costs, the cost that is to replace an employee, I think you'll be a bit surprised. To replace an hourly employee, you're looking at a cost of about $1,500 per new hire. For a technical position, which is our area of focus, it's even more expensive, with replacement costs being 100 to 150% of their annual salary. And no surprise that a C-suite or longer tenured employee costs the most to replace, climbing over 200% of an annual salary. And even if you think that's okay, these costs are high, but they're doable. It's the cost of doing business. We need to look harder to identify costs like lost productivity, potentially missed deadlines, and at a really drained team morale as workload doubles and triples for those left behind, essentially making them feel like they're doing 2 or 3 jobs with no extra pay or incentive. And the damage you do to your brand when a brand is seen as a high turnover organization, which leads to even more turnover. But as we move forward in GCR findings, you'll see that even small incremental changes can have a rippling effect. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Carolyn Turberfield, please.
Thank you, Liz. Let's jump right into the numbers. As we look at the US population, we like to point out that women are not a minority. We make up over half the population. And what is even more interesting, the Department of Commerce conducted a study of 2019 census data. They concluded that women of color will be the majority of all women in the US populations by 2060. So companies not focused on DEI efforts are taking big business risks. When we compare the census data to the GCR2 data, we see that the breakdown by race and ethnicity aligns well. We did add an other box that prompted some interesting comments from our survey respondents. comments that are fully backed up in the data. Many in the survey chose to identify as multiracial, which again will soon be the majority of women in the US population. Some respondents found that the question of race is offensive, and race is a sensitive topic for many. But for our needs in this survey, we had to ask these types of demographic questions. These pie charts tell quite a story. The two pie charts on the left show that the number of women represented in the workforce grew from 45.6% of the working population in 1994 to 47% by 2021. Ideally, the percentage of women in executive management would have an equivalent distribution to the workforce population. To date, this is not the case. Now look at the two pie charts on the right. The top pie chart illustrates that in 1994, only 5% of the individuals in executive management were women. The good news is that the number increased to 35% by 2021. To get the full picture here, we looked back at the federal glass ceiling report. Our question in looking back was, were there women in the 1994 survey that were qualified for the executive management track? And we found that yes, there were women with the experience needed for a management track. The 1994 data showed that minorities and white women very often earned and held the credentials that businesses required for promotions. I mentioned earlier, in 1994, only 5% of executives were women. And that was despite a qualified pool of candidates. The good news is that there was a 30% increase between 1994 and 2021, or about a 1.1% increase per year. It is a small year-over-year increase, but all positive efforts can have a ripple effect. We often get questions about how long. How long does it take to reap the rewards of DEI efforts? At the 1.1% annual growth rate, women executives will not achieve parity for another 13.5 years. To get to parity in 5 years, the rate of change would need to be 3% per year, which seems reasonable. So how do we get to parity and what should we focus on? The data in the next 3 slides will walk us through our findings and provide a few areas to focus on, with the big one being the glass step. The glass step visually represents an early barrier prior to the glass ceiling for women interested in transitioning from individual contributor into management. There is very little support for women or minorities that wish to transition to a supervisor or first level manager, and this hurdle exacerbates the glass ceiling. A 2019 workplace study makes a bold statement around the glass step. Parity remains out of reach without fundamental changes early in the pipeline. We'll get to gender equality faster by focusing early in the pipeline, not at the top. The bar charts you see here from the GCR2 study illustrate this barrier and provide great areas for companies to focus on, as we illustrate in our recommendation section today. Motivation is another area of focus. We look at what really motivates our respondents and what women are interested in with regards to a company, with the top 3 being, first, the opportunity to advance, which seems simple enough, but we've seen there is a lot more to this. Second, compensation and pay are high on the list as well. Again, it should not be surprising that women want to be paid what their male counterparts are paid. The third top motivator is work-life balance. Again, an easy area to identify, but harder to implement. It should be an ongoing effort, and we will get to how shortly. The good news is for employers is that there is no shortage of talented, experienced women in the pipeline for promotional opportunities. 51% of the women surveyed have been working for over 20% years in their area of expertise. Now we just need to ensure they get the opportunities they need to move forward. Over to you, Ashley.
Thanks, Dr. Turbyfield. I'm looking forward to walking through the recommendation section, as there are quite a few opportunities to get where we want to be and to reach our DEI goals. As we worked on building out the recommendation section, we really focused on feedback from survey respondents, our analysis of the survey results, then our research around DEI best practices, and innovative ideas from the Glass Ceiling 2.0 team. We also want to recognize that every organization is on their own journey and can be in a very different place within the 4 levels that make up the DEI maturity model. Some companies are at level 1, which has a heavy focus on legal and compliance needs. Then those companies that have moved to level 2 are really looking to improve to or add to their current programs. At level 3, we start to see a big shift, a shift away from legal and compliance to leaders within your organization really taking ownership of initiatives and of the mission. And finally, at level 4, there's an inclusive culture where DEI is fully integrated into the overall business strategy. So our recommendations differ at each level, but companies may find ideas and opportunities in any of these recommendations. At level 1, we focused on where organizations can get started, what strategies need to be developed, what benchmarks need to be set, what programs, processes, and training that companies either need to initiate or they need to update. So I'll highlight 1 or 2 areas per DEI maturity level, but this section is a really great resource to refer back to. At level 1, it's important to establish baselines with regards to diversity throughout your organization. You need to conduct audits around pay gaps and employee engagement. It's also a great time to encourage the establishment of employee resource groups, or to help grow them if you already have ERGs at your organization. Then decide what's really important to measure. For example, is it more important to measure the number of diverse interviews or the actual number of diverse candidates hired or promoted? And speaking of promotions, I wanted to point out an issue that we ran across in our research. Women consistently score higher ratings in annual reviews than their male counterparts. Yet, they consistently receive lower ratings around future potential, which leads to fewer promotions into leadership. Which is why at level 2, where the focus is on proving and enhancing programs, we really focus on this area of promotions and on associate development. A good practice is to create a formal pool of high potential women in your organization, which, by the way, is a really good benchmark opportunity. How many women has your company identified for this high potential pool? What training have they been provided? And how many have been promoted over the years? Now, it's important to focus on preparing this group of high potential women with mentorship, with help in finding a sponsor, with competency and bias training, and setting up skip level management meetings, allowing them to network with executives. We also want to include training at this time for current managers, training around how to effectively evaluate future performance, especially for those on their teams. Now, this can be hard to quantify, as it's where women are consistently rated lower than their male counterparts with regards to their future potential. Our advice here is to really look at your best managers, your best leaders, what competencies and skill sets help them stand out. Ensure that those specific competencies are well communicated. They're included in your skills-based training for employees that need it. And those specific skill sets need to be laid out in your internal promotional interview guides. So we focused quite a bit of effort around skill set development and promotional processes, as opportunity for advancement was a main motivator for women in our study. Now, we move to a really pivotal point inside the DEI maturity model, where the initiative moves into leader-owned efforts around DEI. So our focus here was around training in general, but with a strong focus on that high potential group of women identified. And you want to focus also on those leading the ERGs within your organization. And the training should include customized curriculum based on professional skill set needs. Training needs to focus on opportunities to network with executives, opportunities to participate in or to observe executive level planning and project meetings, as shadowing can be very effective and it's a great growth opportunity. Then take a look outside your walls for industry conferences, industry events, industry certifications that are out there. Now, we do really want to add a tip here, as it caught our attention during the research. Look at pay gap ranges when you are promoting a woman. You can really lessen the pay gap by compensating her at the high end of the new salary band. Now, HR will balk here, but it's going to be well worth the effort, and you will have a very loyal and engaged employee. Now, this is where DEI can be really fun, as the culture is now one where most employees support, they buy in, and they actually own the mission. And the DEI team should report right into a C-suite executive, one that believes and wholeheartedly supports the DEI mission. Now, at this point, it's great to give back to the community or to increase your ongoing efforts. Getting associates involved in local community DEI events is a win-win-win. It's good for the employee engagement, it's great for your brand, and it's really good for the community. Now, we did want to point out that DEI strategy, the missions and the goals don't necessarily follow a linear path, even though the maturity model lays it out that way. There are really good tips and ideas at each level of implementation. And in addition to the glass step, we've identified 2 other key areas with potential for high impact. That's a professional skill set training opportunity and a larger DEI initiative level opportunity. In our research and reading, one competency really stood out as having the ability to positively impact your DEI efforts at every level and really allow for faster adoption. And that skill set is empathy. Professionals with empathetic managers report increased innovation, increased engagement, and retention. They also report an increase in the ability to navigate their work-life balance, which was a very important issue to the women in our study. Now, it may seem that empathy is a hard skill to train for, especially in those individuals where it does not come naturally. But what we can train around are the skill sets that empathetic leaders have. That's active listening, clear communication. Empathetic leaders ask questions and then actually pause for an answer. Empathetic leaders show appreciation, they say thank you, and they say good job. They respect your work-life boundaries whenever possible. They keep their one-on-one meetings and they own up to their mistakes, really showing others on their team that mistakes are okay. All of these skill sets fall under the definition of an empathetic leader. Now, as we get close to wrapping up, we want to stress that words do matter. By adjusting the tone and message, we aim to be more inclusive, meaning we also want to and need to speak to those not normally included in DEI messaging, white men. Precise, empathetic, and inclusive messages really illustrate an understanding that positive communication can lead to action. But what we do not want to do is minimize the issue that women and people of color are facing. This is not our intention at all. What we do want is to recognize that some terms can be polarizing, even though the meaning behind them is not. Clear terminology can move the emphasis to adding value. Let's take the word equity, for example. This word can create a negative response for some, especially to executives and to those in the C-suite. It can push leaders into that risk mitigation mindset, which is the exact opposite of what we need. Similarly, an accusatory or entitled tone can lead to a defensive response, causing a stalemate, notably with those in leadership roles that are best positioned to champion the DEI mission. Our goal here is to set the stage for an open dialogue and an open mind to allow for meaningful discussion and hopefully really big action. In closing, the GCR report illustrates that there are great opportunities ahead. There are opportunities for the underrepresented demographics within your organizations to be hired and to be promoted at an equitable rate of pay. There are opportunities within your organization to contribute to the bottom line and to increase innovation through diversity of thought. By enhancing DEI efforts, your employees will feel supported. They will grow professionally. This will lead to higher retention, higher engagement, and higher innovation. By creating a process to fairly evaluate candidates for a promotion, more women can and will take that glass step into management. When women in early management receive the continued support, they can take those additional steps that lead to executive leadership roles, thus breaking the glass ceiling. The actionable recommendations in this overview report are intended to improve company profitability, increase industry innovation, and enhance the quality of life for everyone. And more importantly, it's the right thing to do. We really want to thank you all for your time and attention today. And for additional information, please visit theglassceilinginstitute.com.